Welcome everyone to another Security Token Prime webinar. Today we're joined by Jonathan Chambliss from LV8R Labs and Pat O'Meara from Inveniam. How are you both doing this morning?
Excellent. Awesome, brother.
Awesome. So, you guys came out with a very exciting announcement. You guys are basically blending blockchain and the construction industry, and that has implications on commercial real estate and so forth. But before we dive into all of that, why don't we start with some intros? Let's kick it off with Jonathan. Tell us about LV8R Labs and what you guys are working on.
Thank you. So my background is portfolio management. I was a mid-rise declarant transition specialist, meaning I manage the handover process between developers and portfolio owners. I left portfolio management to dig into construction management because of the problems with the handover process, and found that those problems start all the way at design, believe it or not. And so there's been many developments and improvements in construction management, and the product that we are working on is bringing transparency and validation and verification to construction management, however we can do that possibly.
Very nice. And we'll definitely be diving into that a little deeper. But Pat, how about yourself? Tell us about Inveniam and what you guys are doing in the space.
Yeah, so we're lucky we get to work with super smart people like Jonathan, who understand their own niche very, very well, and they understand what matters. They understand what drives value, what destroys value, what you need to monitor, what you need to watch, when you need to watch it, and we partner with them so that they can use our tool to watch that data at the edge, and so that they can feed the information systems that asset managers, portfolio managers, traders need to inform them of the state of the building that they own, the collateral for their private credit, et cetera. And Inveniam is a decentralized data framework that allows data to be delivered to compute functions on demand with proof of origin and proof of state of data. We've got about 70 billion of assets on our platform today. About 14 billion of infrastructure, 6 billion private credit, about 24 billion of private equity, and the remainder is 25 billion private equity, and the remainder is real estate. We're doing a lot with real estate right now. We're pushing into that pretty hard. That's not to say we're not doing the others, but it's really where we're seeing a lot of uptick. And what we're doing is we use zero knowledge proofs to put a hash in the payload of a block. We're on 13 different chains right now. We love working with all the various, as many chains out there that want to work with us. We'd like to work with them. We are leaning into a couple more than others because they're creating markets, whether it's for the mezz, the senior, or the equity, or for funds, et cetera. And then also the tokenization platforms, the ATSs, because we are pre-trade, post-trade servicing of the underlying asset, so that when they trade, the buyers and sellers understand the state of the asset that they're buying. That was a really long answer.
No, I appreciate that. And, these are very thorough introductions, which is good because background is important to understand this concept here. So in the name of background, Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you mean with construction transparency? When there's a development going on, what is important that to be able to see or have access to that currently is very archaic or hard to do?
Sure. In construction management, you have project managers working with architects in a system where the architect has built in a bare minimum capacity in order to fulfill the starting phases of construction. I say bare minimum. In many cases, there is a full life cycle design where a lot of the problems have been resolved. But the point is, you're working with inconsistent sources of data between the architect and the development team, the general contractor. And so there's this feedback loop that has to happen with data between what and how was it designed and how is the design being changed, plus all of the regulatory parties, the state and inspections involved. So it's really an orchestra of service that happens from a lot of different pieces, and we believe distributed ledger offers an elegant solution to a very, very tough problem that many people have been trying to work on for a very long period of time.
And I think, we used to joke, and Brian, I'm gonna jump in here if that's all right, on this, that literally we used to joke about this, that smart buildings, the only people who used to, the only real benefit of smart buildings is somebody in New Jersey could control your air conditioning, right? Like, that's it. There was no other benefit of smart buildings. But when we start to get to things like air quality, how green the building is, when we start to get to reporting, a building that is reporting into a risk book with real data that is actionable, that informs the portfolio manager of the underlying state of their asset, the smart building is going to get a better cap rate than the one that's dumb. It's just a fact. And what that does is it changes cost of capital, it changes value, and all of a sudden, all the smart building benefits really start to come about. Now, what Jonathan's talking about is even a step before that, where you're really maintenance, they care about all of this. And the investor should care about that as well. And what we're doing is connecting, using Jonathan and his smarts on the architect to the general contractor, to the stabilized asset, to the long-term owner, that then gets to the bank and the mezz and the equity and the pieces of the capital stack, and then how that's going to trade and how that's going to inform the value of a private REIT or a public REIT or a family office holding, or the collateral for a loan, or whatever it might be. But that feedback loop, Jonathan began with the feedback loop that really was architect, general contractor, right? But this is where blockchain, if we can literally string this end to end, it really will transform how banks understand the buildings that they're lending against in a whole new level. And I'm sorry to just go, but Jonathan, I'd love for you to maybe just talk about that, right? What is the impact of good design, general construction collaboration do to the value and the maintenance costs down the road?
It's game changing. I would also say just a general value appreciation for tokenization. There's a lot of talk about how tokenization potentially improves value of real estate, and I'll be honest, a lot of projects aren't actually adding a significant value through their tokenization service or how they're applying their data for stakeholders. And as a person with real experience of representing commercial real estate stakeholders, I knew the sophistication of the data that I wanted to be able to have access and to verify for all of my clients, having been paid to do that for most of my career. So if you think about it as just purely a due diligence, if LV8R Labs is now responsible for a very sophisticated due diligence process for arguably one of the already most sophisticated trading platforms on the planet, right? That's no small task. And if we're really trying to move the needle in tokenization, digital assets broadly, or even construction management broadly, it all comes down to the data. Pat really knows what to do with the data. And if you know how to orchestrate the IoT devices, all of the employees, everything that is down chain in commercial real estate, when it gets to the stakeholder levels, we can confidently talk about return, right? We can confidently talk about performance, because we've taken it all the way to design. And in a new development, new project, that gets even more exciting.
I love it. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
Jason. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason. Please excuse me. And by the way, I think I called you Brian earlier. Okay, so you call me anything you want this whole call. Sorry about that.
All good. That's actually a first for me.
Sorry about that.
But no worries. But actually, Jonathan, to your point about, it's all on chain, it's transparent, it's accessible to stakeholders. I did want to ask, who can access it though? Like, do you have to have like an NFT that gets you access, right? Is it token gated, or is it certain parties that can have access, or is it completely public for just about anyone to be able to look into? How would someone that has a stake in this, construction or development be able to truly access this information?
Sure. We work with both fund managers and developers, specifically project managers in development. But we're also having conversations with architects as well. In construction management, there is a process called VDCO, Virtual Design, Construct, and Operate. It's where the architect is the operator all the way through operations. They've built their own building and now they're building it. Our system was intendedly designed for VDCO because we assume that anyone who has control of their data on an architectural level are going to be representing the stakeholders in perpetuity of the life of the asset. So this is the assumption with every single project that Elevator Labs services.
And as we think about that, wallet-based access control to the data and data rights are something that, because Elevator Labs is partnering with us, they're using some of our embedded functionality where there are the rights to see this data passes through. So all of that is something kind of where they're using some of our core technology and then they're building their smarts on top of it. But what we like is this VDCO, which is largely adopted in Europe more so than in the US. Is that a fair statement?
I would say more largely. We do have some institutions here in the US for VDCO, but the regulatory environment in Europe is different. So VDCO is adopting to the new regulatory environment.
And the other big part of it is, in America, you just have tons and tons of smaller developers. You know what I mean? Whereas the majority of development in Europe is done by mid to large size companies.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Whereas in America, you have tens of thousands of small developers, and they know how to build a multifamily, and they're on the lookout for a piece of land that's in a good location that they can get a deal on, that they could get a bank loan and cobble together some cash, and they're going to throw up, a multifamily housing, complex of 300 units. But they're not doing VDCO. You know what I mean? They don't have, who's designing that is really unique to the deal, right? And who the partners say they want to use. And what we want to do is make, through the tool set that Jonathan and Dante and their team are building, that anybody can use it, right? It's not a mid-size and above type of attribute. It's something that any construction company can use. They're getting the benefit of VDCO. They're able to do this, and they're also able to use that as a mechanism to have their asset ready for sale 24/7, 365, refinance it, and not just go to the traditional channels of bank financing and clubbing together a deal in their local community, but actually accessing DeFi protocols, going and selling tokenized equity through somebody like an Oasis Pro Markets or a Rialto, or overseas in Archax or ADDX, but literally expanding the reach. And we think that as we add this beginning piece, we can expand that value chain and the reach of a local developer. And all of the access controls, wallet-based access control, SSO, integration with the Archax, integration with ADDX, all of these various different people. Inveniam wants to make that easy for somebody who's a subject matter expert like Jonathan to just run, right?
Absolutely.
Makes sense to me. And these are all, obviously all tokenization players in our industry that I think we could all agree that the more data, the better. STM being a data company, we understand the value of that as well, and want to be able to track that for any token holders that are participating in a tokenized real estate asset, for example, that has all of this other information on chain as well. I think that, just to your earlier point, Pat, just increases the value of that asset in general.
And I think that go ahead, Jonathan.
I would also add, if you are a stakeholder in commercial real estate and you ever have intent to redevelop that asset, you are then going to engage an architect, and you are now officially in a VDCO model as you are working with the architect. So in light of everyone trying to tokenize their real estate, it was my acknowledgement that at some point we're going to want to redevelop all this real estate too. In order to do that, you have to have a very sophisticated system for dealing with that data.
This is why we're so excited. And Jonathan reached out to us 2 years ago. Is that right? And just began conversations. Tell me about tokenization. Tell me how this works. What do you think? He's working with some folks on our staff, right? What would this look like? And literally, one of the things that we did is we acknowledged, or maybe not acknowledged is the right word, we recognized Jonathan's competence and said, man, we need to help him incubate and launch. You know what I mean? And what does that mean? How do we put this together? How do we structure a deal? How do we support him to build this so that he is delivering the vertical knowledge we need, the construction industry, to feed right in, to plug into tokenization, and really expanding the network of what we want to be a really broad viral network, where whether he's using Tokeny or Polymath or Oasis Pro or Archax or ADDX or some combination thereof, right? And I can mention 24 others, right? I didn't mean to leave anybody out. That those guys, when they're looking for this data, they can see his tool set and it's immediately accessible.
Makes sense. I mean, that relationship has obviously grown. According to the press release, there was an equity stake, I think, that Inveniam took in LV8R Labs. Not sure how much you guys can disclose and whatnot, but we'd love to learn more just in general what maybe future plans together might look like as this relationship continues.
Yeah, I could speak on that. So first of all, shout out to Peter Gaffney. In many ways, he was a huge architect in my project and helping us find the ecosystem participants to really bring value to the concepts. I participated in a hackathon, Inveniam and Accumulate hackathon, and was actually invited with the LV8R project to submit to a second round, which I do believe we would have performed well. But I was only a one-man band at that point, and I was very intimidated with what we were trying to do. And I was honored and proud to represent both Accumulate and Inveniam, but it was all car and no motor. And it really wasn't until Pat gave me an education in private markets, global private markets, that enterprise data, right, enterprise systems development, that we found that motor. It took 2 years to go from elegant race car to elegant race car with a high performance motor. But now I'm very confident about that motor performing on a global level. Now that I have relationships and continue to develop relationships with global thought leaders and experts in construction management across the globe, having a cross-jurisdictionally compliant system becomes even more relevant and important when we're talking about commercial real estate and potential securities.
Yeah, and it really is a great partnership for us, right? The value of Jonathan and his subject matter expertise, his relationships, his vision, his grit, what he wants to do, it's fantastic. We want to support it. And then we plug that in, but I don't want Jonathan to worry about 2048 bit encryption, traveling back and forth to meet a 512 standard for data in motion over carrier lines, that if you're using it's sensitive data that is bank data that they're going to require, right? And yesterday we were involved in a deep dive with lawyers from one of the largest global institutions in the world, and we were at the 11th hour. And at the 11th hour, they brought in a cryptography expert, and they were asking me about that and quantum defense and how do we need to do this, and do we use lattice defense versus straight logarithmic, and we were able to answer all the questions, and we were able to show previously that our software development lifecycle. We were able to show, our too big to fail critical infrastructure, solution set. And Jonathan doesn't need to worry about any of that. Do you know what I mean? And this is the partnership.
Yeah.
Like we just say, we are going to plug you into anyone you want to be plugged into. We want you to design the front end. We want to be an engine, but we are not even smart enough to know. Forget where the race is, right? But what the car needs to look like. Do you know what I mean? And this is, I think, that partnership. And so we came in, made an investment, partnered. We were, I think we either took or are taking some board seats, and we're going to launch a seed round where we're raising about $600,000. And I'm going to be reaching out to some of our friends and family to come in alongside Jonathan and the work that he's doing to go raise that for his seed. And so we're going to be launching that. Jonathan, I think that's next week. Is that right?
Yeah, for some milestones we're looking at. We have an interest in a commercial partnership with IoT hardware partner for our solutions for our clients, and that's kind of our priority number one. The second priority is working with a European financial institution for a European VASP, virtual asset service provider license. We are hoping to have a positive announcements by the end of the year in that effort based on our current discussions. And if that happens, then early next year, we'll be back on this side of the pond, digging into Mexico and South America. So we are aggressively pursuing our international relationships.
I love it. I love it. And hopefully next week at Tokenize This, you'll be able to meet some, quality people that could be an additional, contributor to what you guys are working on already together. Speaking of which, I did see you guys are working with Centrifuge as well. Is it just LV8R Labs and Centrifuge? Is Inveniam also involved? What is that? How does that ecosystem work in the name of this whole construction and blockchain arena?
So I'm a appointed community ambassador for the Centrifuge project. They were also instrumental in seeing the vision in my work and platformed me. Pat has always shown an interest in that protocol since our earliest discussions, and so I've been in a very regular conversation trying to figure out what that relationship looks like. There are a number of ways, especially with some of the new publicly released information about Centrifuge and their new relationships and their potential market. So we're very aware of what's going on in that protocol, and we're happy to continue collaborating with them as able.
Yeah, and to add on what Jonathan was saying, we would love to engage with Centrifuge as much as we can. We think that the structuring of the data and feeding the data templates that we have, that some of them they're building them from scratch, and we have them, they're built, they're functioning, we're feeding them every day. We have a top 10 global bank that we are feeding their risk book for every loan above 100 million that they have in the United States. We are doing this every single month with third-party marks, feeding the risk book, all of the reporting tools. We think we understand this, and we want to create relationships with as many of these as we can. And I think it's we're feeling this, and I think Jonathan's feeling this, but man, the tailwinds right now, I would say we had 18 months of just headwinds, right? Maybe even hurricane headwinds that were trying to sink us all. And now we've got tailwinds pushing us from behind. That's really great.
Very nice, very nice. Is there are there any parts to this announcement or to this partnership that we haven't touched on that may be worthwhile covering? Either of you, if anything comes to mind.
Yeah, I want to hit this the IoT device thing because it really matters, right? And we have some relationships with folks at what is it?
VEEA.
Yeah, and Westinghouse and their building information management systems, where we have some better data that we think, or better software, sorry, that we can connect onto those hardware devices and literally connect those up, and then connect that IoT device where it is attributable to a device that is a branded device that somebody on the capital market side can see directly the source data and they can trust it, and there's a brand. We think that that's enormously valuable. We want to have an LV8R Labs white label branded version of some of these devices, where what Jonathan is building and designing from data structures we can deliver to the end users who will find that really valuable. And that really is, it's extending the value chain. You know what I mean? We're right here, tokenization, secondary markets, but if we can get better accounting treatment, collateralization, reporting, and then we get all the way into state of the building, and we can see from design, construction, maintenance, we just continue to expand that value chain. And if that value chain can be connected in an auditable, smart manner, man, that just it's going to transform how people invest in real estate globally and how they access capital.
Yeah, 100%. And this is something that we've, I think, talked about as of late. People are always raving about, hey, let's take an asset, tokenize it, and trade it. It's like, fantastic, no problem with that. But think about the full life cycle of that asset, what it's going to take to bring all of that on chain, which we've made, I think, a very good amount of progress so far in the last 6-7 years altogether. In crypto years, I guess, is relatively long, but we still have a little bit more to go to bring the full value chain onto the blockchain. But
absolutely,
it's going to be a beautiful, more efficient future for capital markets in general. Real estate is a great one, which I think real estate is one of the asset classes that's probably the most archaic and whatnot. So connecting the dots, and you guys are doing a great job. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Why is that? Right? People keep talking. Pat and I keep talking about. We have the same conversation, kind of ongoing. What is the problem? And the problem is our properties are shedding data. They're shedding data all the time, and the people working in those buildings and the people design. All of these people are shedding data, and it's all going into silos. Some of it, not even all of it. Some of it's going into silos where there's very limited access. Right? If you look at what data lakes are doing for procurement and supply chain management, and some of the larger use of system data, the Inveniam system in many ways solves a lot of problems for construction development, but it has to be implemented, and it has to be built into a process. You have to go to architects and tell them, by the way, you designed this wrong. It could be improved, Mr. Expert in Building Design. And that's not an easy task. No one wants to go to architects, developers, or other marketplaces and tell them, by the way, you're now providing infrastructure. It's a hard pill to swallow.
It is. And one of the things is we can't build something that is end-to-end that demands utilization from end to end, or there is no value creation, right? We have to componentize each part. And the reason is each step of the way, there are already experts, there are already incumbents. And in order to get adoption, you have to go through the adoption curve of who are the early adopters, why do they adopt, what are the characteristics of them, how do we identify them, how do we get them to adopt? And if we're saying, hey, we got to have the entire value chain scoped out in order to get the value, that's a loser's proposition, right? It will take forever or never, right? And so what we're doing is we're saying, hey, what is the value proposition for early adoption around construction management, delivery of that building, and reporting, right? And that it has to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, as well as accounting treatment, collateralization, reporting, as well as tokenization, as well as secondary markets, as well as the creation of derivative markets, as well as repo markets where you're trading liquidity, you're not yet trading risk. And each of these, we have to be able to say, here's the value proposition. Let's go through that adoption cycle. But what's going to happen is once that signal goes end to end, it's going to explode. And then literally we're going to see the whole world come in. Because if you know you have access to greater capital because you're trying something new, you're going to try something new, especially in a capital constrained environment, right? And this is why you have people who exist in hard to capitalize regions adopting the technology earlier, because they are the classic early adopter, and they're saying, if I can gain any advantage at all, I'm going to take it, right? And it's why their international strategy is just fantastic.
Makes sense to me. And so let's go into some predictions. How long do you guys think until we hit critical mass and people are now understanding, hey, this is something we need to hop on, and rather than convincing people, having them start asking, hey, how can we get involved?
So go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry.
I would say tokenization is still very, very early. It's still enterprise early, and few people really understand enterprise early. Enterprise early means if you're not enterprise, you're too early, right? And Inveniam and Pat taught me what it takes to perform in an enterprise environment and an enterprise service solution. So I would love to see more general adoption of tokenization broadly, digital assets broadly, but digital assets exist in architecture now. There's a class coding system in the United States and other countries for digital assets representing architectural designs. So in many ways, we're working from other people's work. Inveniam solved the distributed ledger solution for LV8R Labs, so I did not have to build that from scratch, so that I could start tackling actual problems, which is VDCO. When Pat talks about the front end meeting the back end, front end being architectural, back end meaning operations. When we're holding every architect and every asset owner to the full VDCO stack with a sophisticated system like Inveniam, this allows us to really outperform in both development and redevelopment and operation. So I think broadly you can say, look, you can make an argument for a 15 to 20% improvement in just good full life cycle design, and maybe 10 to 15% over the lifetime of the asset. With tokenization and the right data, I think it's multiples of that.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I literally think it could be 40%, which that's an astronomically high number. But I want to use an example of particularly when we're talking about high-end designer buildings, where the architectural design really impedes operations in major ways, right? When your building looks like a crumpled piece of paper, right? That's a challenge, right, to operate that building. And what happens is, I want to use Elon Musk if we can as an example. When he was building Starlink, and there's a great series of 3 podcasts that he did with Space Force, the head of Space Force, who was just talking about it. He brought the production managers in to the creation and design of Starlink. And the satellite designers were saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use this metal as the greatest conductor for this piece. and the production guys said, nope, we're not doing that. We're not touching that material. It's too hard to use. And the guys were shocked that nobody had ever talked to them back to them before, right? They would always say, this is what best, and everybody would say, okay. And then all of a sudden there was this feedback loop for the construction, and literally you're talking about, what was it? $1.3 million per ounce of cost to deliver something into orbit, and then it went to 130,000, now 13,000, now it's $1,300, and literally we're getting order of magnitude where they just said, we're not going to do this, and they can put into orbit a low cost satellite at a level that nobody else could, because they created a production design feedback loop for a satellite. And you go, for something that expensive, why wouldn't that have been there? Well, the reality is it was so new and novel, nobody wanted to push back and risk the failure of the satellite once it's beyond our reach. Does that make sense? And what Elon Musk did is he demystified that and said, no, we're going to do this. There's enough data. We have a large enough data set. We can do that. As we begin to create operational efficiencies that we're going to be able to embed and code that into design, where when somebody says, okay, I'm going to turn this 90-degree angle, everybody knows that, and that every time you have a 90-degree angle in the air conditioning, and you probably know this better than I, there's a large percentage drop, right, in throughput. And literally that is back of the envelope type stuff that needs to be institutionalized, delivered into the operation of the building. And Jonathan, am I saying that in a kind of too crude of a manner?
No, I would say let's take a broader macro look for a second. What's the current commercial real estate environment look like? Right? What does commercial real estate look like in the U.S. as far as pricing, and what's going to happen with commercial real estate because of COVID and go back to work policy? What are we doing with all of this commercial real estate? How are we going to process it? And if the current conversion rate is astronomical, as if the price of getting something into space, if that cost is going to shrink significantly, then I think there's going to be a lot of sidelines capital ready to attack this market aggressively because of all of the opportunity.
And there are all these great guys who are out there who are coming up with new mechanisms on how they're connecting capital to utility, whether Stefan, who's with the guys of the St. Regis Aspen, where those tokens that they're doing with T0 can be utilized for room nights, so that there's a utility of the equity. And what that does is it effectively lowers your mezz cost of capital by literally half a dozen percentage points, right? So let's call it 600 basis points. Literally, that changes the calculus for the senior lender in a takeover situation where they don't want to take the keys of a building that's underperforming in this market, and it allows for a rehab or a redevelopment or a renovation. But I have to tell you, this type of creativity is going to be demanded, and greater data allows you to paint more vibrant pictures, right? It allows you to slice and dice thinner. It allows you to unearth opportunities. And the devil and the Holy Spirit are in the details, right? And when the traditional banking structure of banks providing refinancing on underutilized buildings is seen as the not workable answer, we're going to have a whole world of early adopters, and that's what we want to get in front of, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, we want to call on as many developers who are interested in seeing how this space is going to change over the next couple of years. This is my personal opinion. right? As developers implement solutions into their own platforms, their ability to connect into private markets, which they're already currently doing through local service providers or however they do it, right? They're going to be able to directly plug into global markets. Think about that from a developer's perspective. You
It,
now have a solution that plugs into global markets.
Wow.
the fact that I can design a cupcake website for my new cupcake shop in Topeka, Kansas, and get it on the first page of Google by gaming the algorithm for search is the reality that a real estate developer in Topeka, Kansas should be able to game an algorithm in order to get on the radar screen of the largest global allocators of capital. But the obstacles, the barriers for that data to be delivered from the largest capital allocators to where the real opportunity is, there are rent seekers, obstacles, and brick walls for that data stream to go back and forth. And what you see is the greatest cupcake company in the world, maybe in Topeka, Kansas, at a little shop, and I picked Topeka for no reason, right? It's the middle of the country. And the reality is that data can get out there. You build the highest performing asset in Topeka, Kansas, you are literally going door to door. You are doing the same thing somebody was doing in 1950, right? Like just full stop. You are doing the same thing. You are getting a group of people together. Maybe you're picking up the phone. Maybe you're sending an email, but there is no mechanism for the world to know about the quality of your asset and you delivering them trusted data without giving the majority of the rents away to somebody who has a massive franchise and you're just selling into their brand and they're bringing capital in and they're getting 2 and 20 on that on behalf of somebody else who's an allocator. This is where data is going to change the game.
If we can work with any developer in any jurisdiction, knowing what we know about the current macro environment and what we know about the Inveniam system, I think we're a lot closer to the next strong bull market cycle for commercial real estate, because I think all the underlying is there ready. It just needs the adoption of the data validators, and the data validators are going to be those developers. It's going to be those architects. It's going to be those project managers. As much as I wanted the operators and the asset managers to rule the world of commercial real estate, it's not the case. The process actually starts with design. And so that's what we're trying to do.
So how can people, that are either watching this or if they distribute it to someone that is in this space, how could they get in contact with either of you to start exploring what this looks like for them and get onboarded?
We have a website, LV8RLabs.com. Feel free to reach out to us there or on LinkedIn. Inveniam is also has a fantastic podcast. I'm honored to be in every episode I get a chance in to bring some of the most talented AEC, architectural engineering and construction professionals I can.
And what we're really seeing is the acceleration of processing of compute, whether it is AI or machine learning or robotic process automation, and delivering data that matters, that informs decision making to the right decision makers at scale. If we don't deliver and make available data about the real estate market, we just miss it, right? We miss it. And what Jonathan is doing is he is the on-ramp for those buildings to get their data into a system where they could do it. And so on our podcast this week, we have literally the largest valuation agent for private assets in the world, Houlihan Lokey. We have a Singapore exchange. We have G42, the head of investments for them. G42 is a $140 billion sovereign entity in the Middle East. Like these guys, they just signed a deal with Microsoft and OpenAI. These guys are moving the needle, and they need an on-ramp for real estate, right? And that's LV8R Labs. So yeah, go to our website, check us out. I mean, it's just the time is now for, we don't want a dumb token. We want a smart token, right? To trade that has all sorts of information about what the state of that asset is. So you can prove state of assets, so you can prove value of assets, state of assets, state of data, value of the asset, value of the capital stack. So I can trade the capital stack, and I can use it in many, many, many new ways. That's what's exciting. And let me tell you, and all of that plugging into you, right? This is a security token markets play, because you can be the next Bloomberg that people are going to. And to do that, they need to have data that matters, not just about who bought it and sold it and what the volume is, but what does that represent? What's the underlying asset that it represents? And that's Elevator Labs.
I also, as a Security Token Prime member, I also don't want dumb buildings. I want smart buildings, and I want our tokens to represent the smartest buildings in the world.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate both of you. And, on stm.co, we'd love to host as much information available all in one spot for everyone for token holders to be able to access, as well as anyone else institutionally as well, to make smart decisions in this space, especially as capital markets are evolving and everyone else is coming on chain. I think it's no longer a secret. I think everyone is at least starting to learn about it. And so I appreciate both of you for taking the time to share your insights, share the vision here. And we look forward to more insights from you guys as you guys continue to build this, as you continue to have results and case studies, all that. We'd love to feature it on Security Token Prime for our members. For anyone that's watching, by the way, on social media, remember, Security Token Prime is a free resource where you can have data, research, webinars, quality webinars such as these here, where you're truly learning about what's going on in the space. So definitely sign up at securitytokenprime.com. Pat, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. Any parting thoughts before we log off?
Pat?
My parting thought is, anybody who thinks that this is happening, partner with Elevator Labs. Right, John is the real deal. He's got the subject matter expertise. We're trying to bring in the right partners, the right early adopters and customers. We are so excited to be a partner with John and Dante and everybody else at the Elevator Labs team. And I want to encourage everybody, come on, take a look, and we'd love you to come on in. The water's just fine.
I love it. I love it. Jonathan, close us out.
Yeah, the reception by Inveniam has been amazing. What we're going to accomplish is really has been inspiring to me, continues to be inspiring to me, and inspiring to others. I'm happy to work on something I'm really passionate and excited about, and just happens to be my professional expertise. So I'm happy to be doing good work with good people.
When you enjoy what you do, it doesn't feel like work, or at least it's a little bit more tolerable, right? And whatnot. It's fun. So love that. Love that. Thank you both once again. We're signing off, everyone. Have a great, amazing rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.